Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we have an overview of Rob Lucci in the upcoming set Pillars of Strength, which releases at the end of this month, like the end of this month, like June 30th, and then the next day is July 1st. So we have just a couple more weeks in set 2, and I'm really excited to start talking about set 3 and being able to play with the cards, physically in my hands and stuff. So we're going to talk about Rob Lucci, which is a new leader. He has kind of an archetype with him too in the set, which we're going to talk about, and just kind of like generically good like black cards that are going to be in this set too. So it should be fun. We're going to have an example deck list at the end. I've been testing that list for a bit on my stream, which again I've been streaming Tuesday, Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. Western time. So make sure to check those out when you can. And let's just jump on into this overview. So Rob Lucci is pretty much the only black leader we get in this one. We have the Charlotte Lindland. It says black and yellow leader, which hasn't been like, it's been okay. I don't think it's really consistent all the time. I've been trying. We'll see if we can get there, but he has this: your turn. Once per turn, you may discard 2 cards from your hand. When an opponent's character is KO'd, you get to set this leader as active. So pretty neat effect there, and it's just KO'd by anything, which means that you can use it for, like, for example, if you just put 10 Dawn underneath him, attack into something, it's going to get KO'd, and then you can discard 2 and then attack into something else, right? So kind of like a more interesting version of like Useless Kid in a lot of ways. I would argue probably a little bit more expensive since 2 cards are a lot, and a little bit obviously trickier to sequence at times if your opponent's kind of playing around it. But obviously I think black is one of the colors that has just some of the best destruction in this game, and because of this too, it just gives you like an extension to sometimes close out games or really just pressure down some of your opponent's cards, which I think is really nice. So that's the leader there. Pretty basic, but I think it can be pretty effective there too. And so we're just going to jump right on into some of the staples from this. So the CP9 is the kind of the archetype for this deck, and we're going to start with Kaku, which he's fantastic for what he does. And in general, the idea of this deck is you just put a lot of cards into your trash, and then you can return cards from your trash to the bottom of your deck to help pay for the cost of some of these cards. So Kaku says, on play, you may return 2 cards with CP and their type from your trash to the bottom of your deck in any order, KO up to one of your opponent's characters at a cost of 3 or less. So obviously you guys see like most of the destruction effects that black has are 2-for-1s, meaning that you have to spend the card itself and pitch another card to get the destruction. But Kaku being able to be a 5/6, which then you also get to get the destruction of something 3 or less, which obviously you can help bring down the cost of other cards with black since it's pretty good in that color. It's just very, very strong. Like no real cost for this guy. He also is a 1k counter for some reason. I think this card would be still very playable if it didn't have that counter, and definitely like the best card I think for this entire archetype, right? It kind of revolves around how good this card is and how much value you can get from it too. So that is Kaku, and then we also have Khalifa, which is pretty good. It's kind of like an analog to Smoker in a lot of ways. So it's a 2k counter, which is already pretty nice. On play, you can draw 2 cards, trash 2 cards from your hand, then give to one of your opponent's characters -2 to their cost during the turn. So being able to help things get into the right ranges, being a 2k counter, but also being able to kind of cycle through your hand a little bit better, I think is very strong, and something that sometimes black has a little bit of issues going into. And then also Bluno, so he's a 5 cost, 6k, also with 1 counter, has Dawn ×1. This character gains blocker, which is quite good. Then also on KO, play up to 1 character at the cost of 4 or less with CP and its type from your trash and rest it. So you can use this to play something like Khalifa and some other targets that we're going to talk about, but then Khalifa can also give your opponent's characters -2 on their turn, which is kind of rare, and can also put stuff in the kind of the range of impact shockwave as well. So nice little combos there, and just a very solid card in a lot of ways. So those I'd say are the 3 kind of strongest cards in this deck, an archetype of this. So moving on, we're going to go to the high end, and so we have the Rob Lucci super rare. I'm going to just say it out the gate. I've very rarely seen people use this card. I don't think it's incredibly good in a lot of ways. I think it's just kind of clunky for what it is. If you run it, play like 1 or 2 copies, but on play, you return 2 cards with CP and its type from your trash to the bottom of your deck in any order. This gains rush during the turn. So it seems like kind of okay. Being able to get rush on this is moderately strong, but on the other hand, it's just dead in your hand a lot of the time too. So I don't think it's incredibly worth it. You guys can try it for your own, but I haven't found a lot of success with this card. Then there's also Aisha, which is not technically in the archetype, but it's definitely a card that you need to talk about when we're talking about set 3 and black, and it's just a very, very good card. Like, I think this is just honestly just a better version of our 10-drop Kuzan, just because it's a little bit more flexible in what you're able to do with it, and very strong. So I'm going to start with the on-play effect. If your opponent has 6 or more cards in their hand, trash 2 cards from your opponent's hand, you get to do it. So it's random, which means it's better than your opponent choosing which 2 cards. So If they have exactly 2 cards in their hand, you get to snipe 2, which means if they had a card that they wanted to play next turn, you have like a 33% chance of getting the ones that they were wanting to keep around. So very strong there. Just making your opponent discard 2 means that it brings them kind of to your level, since you're going a lot of like 1 for 2s in a lot of ways. So that helps out there too. And then Dawn times 1 your turn, all your opponent's characters get -3 to their cost. So very helpful for that too, and can get obviously some good interactions. Only your turn, but I think this is a very solid card. Then it's an 8-drop 9k, which is kind of, again, obnoxious to get around. So really like this guy. I think he's very strong and helps this deck and a lot of other black decks as well. And then just some generic support cards. We have Spandaman, which just is saying, on play, if your leader has CP in its type, look at top 3 from your deck, reveal 1 CP other than Spandman, and then add it to your hand, then trash the remaining cards. And then so being able to have a searcher in this archetype is great. It's not a great searcher because it only searches 3, but it also puts cards into your trash, which becomes kind of important later. There's also Fukuro, which is a 3-drop 3k counter or blocker that says it can't be KO'd by effects. So it's kind of like a mini version of Borsalino, which is very strong and then has blocker, so that's very flexible for you there. And then this 4-cost vanilla is actually pretty strong too. We're going to show like why we're going to have some interactions with 4 costs in this deck too. We kind of saw it already with the Bluno, but we're going to talk about the next thing next. So there's Air Door, and I call it kind of a roulette because some people just say this card's bad, and I understand it. Sometimes this will just lose you the game in a lot of ways, so you do have to be kind of cognizant on that. So it says main, if your leader has CP in its types, look at top 5 cards of your deck, play up to 1 character at the cost of 5 or less with CPs in its type, then put the rest in the trash. So if you see the wording there, if you whiff, then you just don't play anything. So for 4, you tap 4 Dawn and discard a card, and that's like pretty rough for you. So that I've seen people whiff on that, and they feel like they just lose on the spot, unfortunately, which is kind of rough. But being able to play a cost of 5 or less means that you can kind of ramp up into a 5. So for example, the Kaku or the Bluno, you get to play that a turn early, which is quite nice. And then also just 4 cost to play, like even like the 4-cost vanilla, and then get to put more cards in your trash, which is kind of helpful. Is kind of the idea. And then also as a trigger to play up to 1 black card with a cost of 3 or less from your trash. So these 2 are kind of just some of the better ones. I think like Fukuro is just the best one more times than not, just because, again, it's just a really hard blocker to get rid of. But we have Wanze, which you can discard a card from your hand. If your leader has CP in its types, you get to KO up to 1 of your opponent's characters at the cost of 1 or less, which can be helpful, like for a cheap way to proc your pop something and then proc your leader effect to get a restand. So that can kind of be helpful there. And then also just Nero. I do like Nero just because it is a 5k counter, or a 3-drop 5k vanilla. It just helps you with your ratios just a little bit better, especially helps you going first sometimes, because if you see a lot of these cards that are really good, I feel like you want to go even still like kind of the better number for black in this game. So if you have to go second or first, then Nero can kind of help you out there too. But Air Door, I think it's good for most of the case, but it's something you have to be kind of play around. I don't know if it'd be broken if it just said play from your trash top 5 and then play 1 from your trash. That would obviously make it way more consistent, but I'm not sure if it's too consistent if you do that. But it's sometimes you will lose the game about it, and it's really frustrating. Not if you build around it, it's not, but it's I've seen it happen. People get really frustrated. So, anyways, last cards we're going to talk about before we go to the deck list are just some additional events that we get here. So, 6 King Pistol, which is just a counter. Trash 1 card from your hand up to 1 of your leaders or character gets plus 3k during this turn. So we've seen this before in blue. And also trigger, draw 1, then KO up to 1 of your opponent's characters at a cost of 1 or less. So moderately good, being able to just get like some cycle if you need to, and if you want to be like more aggressive in the fact that you want to like not leave any Dawn open, and then you still have a 3k counter available to you. I think that's pretty good. There's also Soap Sheep, which I think this card is pretty bad, but we'll talk about it anyways. You give it to 2 of your opponent's characters -2 to their cost for the turn. So this feels like it's a discard 1 in a deck that already is very good at discarding their own cards. And so it's not great. And then like the triggers, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. So like it just like goes neutral, and I don't think that's super good. And then there's also Tempest Kick Sky Slicer. I like this card, and looking at this card, I'm like, man, this would be very good in Garp. So it's made me look at Garp again in set 3. But May and KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 0 are up to one of your opponent's stages with a cost of 3 or less. So obviously with Garp, it's very easy for Garp to just put Dawn underneath himself and get rid of stuff. But in this deck, it's just okay. I don't think it's incredibly good in any way, but it's just something that being if Boatbeard was around, maybe this would be a good kind of tech for it. But even then, I think it's just an okay card. So anyways, that's all the singular cards we're going to talk about. Let's get into the deck list. And here is my example deck list that I've been using on my live streams. And again, I've been streaming on Twitch from pretty much 8 to noon, Tuesdays and Thursdays, West Coast time, so Pacific time. So it's been a really good time. If you guys want to check those out, I highly recommend it. I've been trying out a bunch of different decks and just been getting a lot of gameplay in. So, but this is my build that I've been using, and I feel like it's been pretty good for what it is. On the low end, we don't have a lot of turn 1 plays, unfortunately. So, but I think generally you want to go probably second with this deck still, but we do have like Suru, which is good for getting things into range for our destruction effects. We also have the Spandam, which lets you use the search for cards, which helps you with your consistency a little bit. It's only top 3, which is rough, but that's what it is. Fukuru and Toshigi, if you're going first, helps you there. We also play Nero. Again, I was saying, like, I do like just the fact that this is a card you can just play, and if you have to go first, it's a good card to just kind of drop down sometimes. So I like that. And then we are playing the Air Door Roulette here. So again, I think this is a pretty good card. How many targets do we have in here? It might be easier to say how many targets do we not have in here. So we have 4, 6, 9, 12, and then 20, about 20 target, 24. So about half of our deck are hits for this. So if you miss this, it's pretty unlikely. It can happen, but I think you're in a fine spot for that there, and you'll hit it moderately consistently. Just the fact that it set up your trash, which means that you can set up your Kakus, and sometimes you get to play this early, because if your opponent went if your opponent went first and you went second, so on turn of 4 Dawn, you're able to play Air Door when the biggest thing they could have played was a 3 cost. You can get Kaku off of it, and then you can get an immediate pop from it. So I think that's good. I think that helps you out a lot, and it's a very good combo for you. So and then from there, you just kind of a value-based thing. So Blue Note gets some value there. Sakazuki obviously can play itself and trade on tempo as well. And again, if you get a bunch of these 6Ks, they're sometimes hard for your opponent to answer. So I think that's okay there. And you kind of have to make like the decision of where am I sitting in the fact of like, do I want to be defensive early game and like have a smaller hand size, or just like let them hit me early, get some card advantage from it, and then just be able to develop a board and push it from there. So and then lastly, we have like Borsellino for some defense power, Impact Wave for that as well. And again, this card's really great. This card's fantastic, and if your opponent's not used to what this meta is, you can just hit this on turn 8 and make them like discard 2 cards when they're not expecting it. And obviously hand destruction is not very popular in this game either, so it's pretty nasty at times. It feels very good. So anyways, that is my example list. Let me know what you guys think about this, what changes you guys would make for your own list, and that should be it for me. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to check out some of my Twitch streams, and that will be it. So I'll see you guys next time.